Now is former DCI from the Met Police, Perry Benson, and former police sergeant Harry Tangye. Let's start with you, Perry. What do you make of these new measures? It would seem a good thing, right? I mean, at the moment, we are bogged down in a system where we have self-appointed lawyers who can't get rid of the bad eggs. Surely it makes sense to cut that process out and to have coppers policing coppers.
I think in the most serious cases that have obviously occurred, and yes, it is a good thing. I think chief constables should be able to get rid of certain officers who commit the most serious offences. But also, let's not forget that the removal of independent legally qualified chairs, they were introduced to provide sound and legally reasoned judgment and reduce appeals and be fair to everybody. And if we're getting rid of these legally qualified chairs and these panels, then what is to stop officers facing, say, malicious allegations, and then the chief constable, because the government and because the public expect officers to behave correctly, being sacked because of potential malicious allegation? And that's what I think, the Police Federation are really concerned about. Chief constables themselves are not immune to misconduct themselves. And if we're having them make the final decisions, I think this also, undermines the officers who go in, day out to do a good job, who may find themselves subject to a complaint, who may then feel that they're going to be sacked because of the current sort of political pressures they're facing. Yeah, but bringing you in now, Harry Tangye, after Wayne Couzens, after David Garrick, confidence in the police force is at rock bottom. Surely anything which fast-tracks the ability to get rid of bad officers, thousands of whom are on full pay and aren't out of the force yet, surely anything that helps get rid of those kind of people is a good thing, right?
Isn't a simplified world a wonderful place? Unfortunately, it's not as simple as that, as we well know. It's really the problem we have is just as just been mentioned there, is you're relying on one individual, and the whole point was that in 2016 these legally reasoned was brought in for legally reasoned judgment were these legally qualified chairs, and it was to stop these sort of kangaroo courts where a police chief constable may have thought, well, actually, I know he's guilty already. I've got social media banging from the side saying that he's got to go. This is terrible. Look what's on people's phones that they've videoed that have been carefully edited, and the pressure is going to be immense. And also to show he's very strong, or she's a very strong leader. We shouldn't do that. We should leave it to a non-biased, legal to prevent all these appeals that were going on before, these sort of kangaroo courts that could be the case. And we should not confuse low public support for the police or with social media, because it's not. It's entirely different. And I think you'll find the great majority of the public do support their police force, do have faith in them. There's 145,000 of them. And unfortunately, I think some senior officers are more career management-wise as opposed to pure leaders who we can completely trust to make unbiased decisions on these individuals that obviously can be held. We heard that one in West Midlands. A police sergeant was wondering whether he's got his job for 2 years. The board, with a legal chair, apologised. I don't know why you're here. This is ridiculous. And this is the danger, of course. And we've got to guard about this. The wheel's going round. We're going back to what we were before. It doesn't work.
OK, Perry, isn't this dealing with a symptom, but the underlying cause is there seems to be a fundamentally flawed process of basic vetting? For example, if I want to work in my children's school, I have to have a full DBS check, and any minor misdemeanour would stop me even volunteering in a school. How can it be that we have such a flawed vetting system for police officers that people with serious criminal misconduct can actually become acting police officers?
So this is something that the government have sort of brought upon themselves. They keep sort of allowing officers to leave, and so they can put impossible measures on police to try and recruit more numbers. So the standards of recruitment has dropped over the last 10, 15, 20 years. We've seen, certainly in London, in the Met, they've allowed people to join with convictions. We've allowed officers, the Met in particular, brought in a process where you had to live in London before you could apply to join the Met. And that then stopped hundreds, if not thousands, of excellent would-be officers joining the Met just because they weren't from London. And it was on the basis that they thought that they wouldn't understand how London sort of people behave. Well, London is one of the most multicultural cities in the world, full of obviously every kind of background and walk of life. And so anybody should be able to police London if you're a police officer. But I think the vetting procedure needs to be changed. It needs to be stronger. I do agree that if officers fail vetting, then they could be looked to be sacked. But I also think that there are far too many officers in police with criminal convictions who were allowed to keep their jobs. Now, that was in previous times, allowed and agreed and acceptable. Yet, if these officers are meant to be the best of the best, protecting the public, I personally don't think it is right with officers having convictions should be in policing, personally.
OK, Harry, the Home Secretary Suella Braverman is on the warpath today in The Telegraph. She's slamming woke policing as a problem. Things like taking the knee and policing tweets, not policing streets, non-crime hate incidents. How fair an assumption do you think it is to make that the basic ethos of policing has been consumed by a woke attitude which prevents rank-and-file officers from doing a proper job?
I think 90% of police officers and police forces are doing the right job. It's your one or two that catch the headline, which are completely wrong, and they do get drawn into this wokeism, if you like. And things were mentioned such as kneeling for Black Lives Matter, and that's an example. £80 million worth has disappeared off, according to the accounts, for Black Lives Matter, and it's an example of police officers being very careful. They're trying to appease an angry crowd in front of them, very emotional, very, very angry. And it's so important they are seen. That uniform has to be a uniform of discipline, respect, in order that they can get some sort of authority when they need to use that authority. And it used to be used correctly, of course. I mean, Pride, for example, I know a lot of gay people now are distancing themselves slightly from Pride because it doesn't represent them. There's a lot of discussion about that. And we don't want to be, as police forces, police officers, it's much safer to stick to the law, protecting life, property, and there's a difference between trying to trying to be a part of the community, trying to get the support and confidence of the community, with actually, it's a bit like if we're all friends, when you need to actually put your foot down and say you've lost that authority. I think this is the real problem. And some of these, for example, police forces saying we need to have all these communications with community meetings and things like that.
Harry, it's going to cut across you now. I've only got a minute left. I want to come back to you, Perry. Suella Braverman's accusation that the police has been consumed by wokery. What's your take on that?
Well, I think this is something the government have brought upon themselves. I think they want the police forces to be representative of the communities they serve. And so I think there is a lot of pressure on police officers, as my colleague just mentioned, to appease the public and to sort of try and build those trusts with the communities. And I think the message has got lost of how we build that relationship and build that trust and confidence with the communities that we serve. I think there is a wider discussion that needs to be had. I think certainly, as my colleagues have mentioned, Black Lives Matter and Pride and Notting Hill Carnival, for example, these are sort of discussions that we need to have with communities of how we are better to serve them. I don't think personally that officers should be taking the knee and things like that. I think it does potentially send the wrong message. But we do obviously want to support all communities and obviously listen to them and find out how we can work together to obviously build safer streets for everybody.
OK, Perry, Benson, Harry Tangye, thank you very much for joining us today. An excellent debate. I think a lot of people out there will be agreeing